Hello, and welcome to the Tabletop Role-Playing Games Freelancer Mentorship Podcast, or the TTRPG Freelancer Mentorship Podcast. I am Crystal Mazur. I am the host, and the goal of our podcast series is to help people who are interested in freelancing, who might be curious about how freelancing works, or who are struggling to jump into freelancing or with a certain part of freelancing, to get connected with other writers, new writers, and listen to some of the most prolific game designers and writers within the industry kind of give advice and talk about some of the experiences that we've had. If you haven't listened to our first episode, which was getting started in freelancing, please go back and listen to that. There is also a live recording from Gen Con that you can listen to that kind of jumps off of that too as well. And this episode is our freelancer pay and negotiations, which has been a kind of a hot topic lately. And so I have three guests with me today. I have Jessica Marcrum.
Oh, hi! Sorry, I forgot I was supposed to say hello after my name. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
That's okay. I have Eloy Lasanta.
That's me.
And I have James Nettum.
Hello.
All right, and we are very excited to get started with our episode. So, I briefly mentioned Gen Con in our introduction, but three of us were at Gen Con this year, and I know, Eloy, usually you go. You didn't this year. Unfortunately, you were very missed. Travel is very hard, and...
Yeah, I do have Gen Con news, so I have something to contribute to the conversation at least.
Ooh, you have Gen Con news.
Yes, but I won't go first. It's okay.
Who would like to go first?
It's your show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, come on.
Fine. Okay, so... my Gen Con was really good. I hosted 3 different panels. The TTRPG Freelancer panel. I hosted a horror and gaming panel with a whole bunch of people from Chaosium as well as Hunters Entertainment. And I also hosted a live recording for Darker Days Radio. And I got to hang out with a bunch of people. I had the freelancer meetup, which was really, really awesome. We even had somebody phoning in from Canada, which was kind of cool.
That meetup was amazing, and I'm so grateful to you for having it.
Thank you. So I'm really glad you were able to come.
I'm really grateful that it was not a super spreader event. Thank you for encouraging masks.
Yeah, that was important to me because, yeah. Jess, did you want to go next?
Sure. My Gen Con was very busy. It was really fun, though. I was on 2 panels. I moderated one and was on the other. One was about uncaged goddesses and basically writing and running Tier 4 adventures as well. And the other was with Three Flings, the Twitch show that I've been producing for almost 3 years, co-producing and DMing, and we were partnering with Utopia, another Twitch channel, to talk about one-shots and how to use those. But the really exciting news is that Uncaged Goddesses, which I was writing director for, won 2 Ennies. We got the Silver Ennie for Best Cover and the Gold Ennie for Best Adventure. So that was really super exciting.
That was awesome to see. I was very, very glad to have been there, to be able to see everyone accept their awards for the Ennies this year. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, when they announced the silver winner, I was like, oh, well, we didn't get gold. And I picked up my beer and then they said our name and I almost fell out of my chair. So if you were watching it live or watch the video, that's why there's such a ruckus going on in our row as we head up to the stage.
That is amazing. So, James, how was your Gen Con?
It was extremely productive. So I went mostly in a professional capacity. And by that I mean checking out new product, trying to get into game demos of product I'd never played before, and then finding new clients excuse me, new game manufacturers that wanted to get into retail.
So your Gen Con experience is actually fairly different because you have a different side of the role-playing industry. Tell us just a brief about that, and then you can plug stuff later.
So I currently work at Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, Wisconsin. I've been there since November of 2019. Before that, I worked for Pegasus Games in Madison, Wisconsin for 13 years. So I come from the retailer end of the tabletop industry. I get your stuff into the hands of the end users.
So, and you're joining us today as kind of a newbie to the freelancing side, because you and I have had a lot of conversations about it, and so I thought it'd be kind of awesome to bring you on and, pick our brains about things. So, all right, and then, Eloy, what's your announcement? What's your Gen Con stuff?
Well, I mean, I always have something to announce. No, the cool thing, and one of the reasons that I couldn't go to Gen Con, besides family stuff going on, but also I spent a lot of time working on it was a secret project at the time, or maybe not secret, but kind of less publicized. But this year was the first year that Central Michigan University and Gen Con actually put together a gaming program through Central Michigan University. And I got to teach the pilot program, come up with a syllabus, everything, in order to actually kickstart this whole thing and really get it going. And that was, of course, the soft launch. And at Gen Con was where they announced the whole thing, and that, I'll be teaching again, and they're having 2 other teachers come in. So it's actually like a huge deal. The name of my class is The Art of Game Crafting, where I'm actually teaching people how. Been one of my dreams forever. So that was announced at Gen Con, which is why that's my Gen Con news.
That's fantastic, Eloy. Even I didn't know about that. That's great.
I was sworn to like pseudo secrecy, but now I'm allowed to shout it to the rooftops. I'm very excited about it.
Oh, now I can't wait to look at your curriculum pathways and stuff like that. Now I'm gonna go be a nerd after this. If you have a link to the program or anything like that, please let me know, and I will put that in the show notes and share that everywhere, because that's awesome.
Yes, I definitely have that. I'll share that with you.
Perfect. All right, so I like to kind of give or have everybody do a brief introduction to freelancing, like how they got into it or why they got into it, just to kind of give everyone a feel for how we all approach it, because there are so many different avenues to getting into freelancing. And so I wanted to kind of showcase with everybody just how extensive it can be and the different pathways. So for instance, I started doing workshops for teachers on using role-playing games and card games and board games, as well as comic books, in their classrooms as teaching materials. And a friend of mine asked me if I would ever be interested in writing. He'd been trying to get me to do reviews and stuff like that for games for many, many, many years. And then finally said, hey, you have until I think it was the end of September to write a scenario for First Fables, which is a open license game that is still up on drive-thru, and it was supposed to be for Halloween. And I wrote the scenario, and it went off, and he got art for it. There was layout, and in fact, Eloy was my layout person, right?
Yep, that's how we met.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, was that we finally were able to connect after that, and you told me you had a project coming up and if I would be interested in writing in it, and it ended up being the PIP system. So, and that's kind of how I got into freelance writing. Let's see. Eloy, why don't you tell us about yours?
Oh gosh. My experience with freelancing was pretty organic. It basically was that I was already writing free stuff and putting it online, and people seemed to be responding pretty well to it. So I said, "Hey, maybe I should try and get paid for this." So I looked for open calls and found a couple of different projects. I ended up working on co-writing a book called Kid World for Vajra Enterprises, which was really fun and really deep. I also wrote for Witch Hunter: The Invisible World. I was very proud of the writing I did for that. But the game itself was, it is what it is. But those experiences essentially taught me that I already kind of had all the tools to just make my own games. So then that's when I started publishing my own stuff. And of course, the thing about freelancing is that if you're already writing your own stuff, it's super easy to get a freelance job a lot of the time.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who have gotten in through stuff like that or through community content. So
Exactly. I mean, if you already have something that's out there and people like it, then it's just easy just to be like, oh, you need a writing sample? Where here's this thing. Oh, it's got 5 stars on, drive through. Oh, that's really interesting. It's like it already breaks the ice as opposed to somebody who's really starting off new and is just like really like trying to get somebody to give them a chance. That's a completely different story than years after you've released your own stuff and you've been writing for a while. It's that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Jess, how about your story?
I got started kind of by accident. One of my friends told me about Ashley Warren's call for writers for the original Uncaged project. And I'd never written for any game before. And my friend was like, well, you know a lot about mythology and you're a good GM, so pitch for it. And I got accepted. Uncaged was a runaway hit on DM's Guild, and I don't know if it started the whole anthology trend, but it definitely encouraged it. And then I started getting hired for other projects, like some things with Onyx Path, a couple other anthology things, and then I just started being more involved in the industry. And like after I'd had a lot of writing under my belt, as a teacher in the storytelling collective formerly called the RPG Writers Workshop, and I was a moderator for the DM's Guild Facebook group that is now defunct. But when it closed, I had several people reach out to connect and say like, hey, let's stay in touch. If you want to pitch for company, please do. And started getting gigs that way. And now I've written for Cubicle 7 and Onyx Path and MCDM and Hit Point Press. And so that's kind of what I do.
That is definitely a very, very cool way to do it, because being involved in the community helps connect you to so many people.
Yeah, and people, I know it's kind of a meme to refer to like Twitter as a hell site or Twitch as a hell site, but I have made so many connections and friends through that, and I don't know. It can be really terrible sometimes, but also that's how you meet people that you want to collaborate with. And then you meet people you want to hire, and you meet people that want to hire you. And for me, at least, that's how I've gotten a lot of work.
Yeah, the internet is a lot of sifting through trash people to find the cool ones.
I hope that's the understatement of the podcast.
Yeah, it's really disappointing when someone you think is a cool one ends up not being one. But
Well,
That's
that's a whole other story.
yeah. I'm following all of you now, so hopefully it's none of you.
Unless I have like some strange turn of personality here,
I know,
it would be
right?
odd.
It
But
would be odd. I would hope that like someone would be like, "Hey, are you okay?" All right. And James, tell us a little bit about like your like because I know you haven't written for anything specifically yet, but maybe stuff that you are interested in, or even like how you got into your position, like your job.
Uh, well, I'm now feeling very old because I did do community content way back in the early 2000s. So before there was any drive-through RPG or anything of that sort. I did some community content in college, both for White Wolf when they had their moderated, sanctioned online chat programs, and for one popular fan server on Neverwinter Nights. And
Back in the
they would,
day.
yes. And when they would let, they worked with GameSpy to let people host their own servers. So I contributed some written content to a server that had a lot of people and was really cool. And then, as what happens with a lot of things, flamed out spectacularly. Uh, and that was before I got involved in the industry professionally. I stumbled backwards into my job. I needed a part-time gig. I thought, well, Pegasus Games, this seems like a great spot to work. It's a game store that was around when I was a kid. Actually started in 1980. And yeah, I'll stick around through college. Then I went full-time. Then I started helping manage the store. And now I work at a store that's got the largest selection of games in the world. So it kind of accidentally happened.
Yeah, you have that community piece too. It's very interesting, like just how connected the community can actually be, even if we're distant.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird not having done it for, 15 years, how now the networking site is Twitch and Twitter and whatnot. And when I was doing it, there was no central repository that I knew of. It was just who do you game with online and who do you chat with on AOL Instant Messenger.
I mean, a lot of my first hires were my friends. So like that's kind of how it works. You work with who you got around you until you meet more people.
I'm doing kind of the similar with the podcast because I'm reaching out to friends to kind of get it going and to start conversations and stuff like that, and hopefully branching out from there. So, all right. So let's start getting into the bulk of this conversation here. And this is like a really, really heavy conversation because nobody likes to talk about pay. And it has become somewhat stigmatized over the years. It's starting to slowly not get that way, especially now, with unions and unionizing and demands for better pay, which are absolutely legitimate in many of the different industries. So there are some different types of pay within this industry overall. And that is the per word, the flat rate or bulk pay, and then royalties. So let's kind of just let's have a conversation around is there something that you prefer, or is there something that you feel is more fair, or is there something that you completely stay away from if it's like a red flag for you? Because everyone's kind of different on this.
I'll jump in
Yeah.
because I'm full of opinions. The you know my What I will say is my first game that I ever wrote for was less than a cent per word plus royalties. And the problem with any kind of royalty, anything in the gaming sphere here that we have here, unless you're dealing with one of those big old giant companies, is that we're all very bad people. We make great games, but business is not necessarily what we're in business to do. We're in it to make games, but people don't like accounting. So like I've waited a year, maybe. I think the longest time it took for me to get paid was like a year and a half to get paid. What royalties implies is that that person is going to keep track of that for time immemorium and keep cutting you a check. And this is just, a sole proprietor in their garage writing stuff. So it's like royalties, no thank you. Uh, per word is good. I don't mind flat rates. If they're like, hey, and I do a lot of flat rate stuff when I do like mechanics consulting or when I'm doing that stuff. Usually, if I'm doing a lot of writing, like thousands of words, then sometimes I might just do like, hey, let's make this a per word thing. But if it's more development work and more kind of conceptual stuff, then I definitely will. I'm okay with a flat rate because it's hard to put a per word on mechanics design because you might spend 10 times the amount of time coming up with really good mechanics than it does take to actually write them. So I feel like each of them has its own kind of application. Royalties is not necessarily one that I'm interested in. Like, unless it's like I own the IP or something, then like, sure, give me a cut of whatever you sell. But yeah, it's otherwise, no, I'm good. Per word or flat rate for me.
I have a lot of opinions about this. It really depends on what you're doing. I know some people prefer flat rate, and when I do sensitivity reading, I tend to do an hourly rate, which I know some people hate, because if you do something really quickly, you're getting paid less, right? But also paying per word for like editing or sensitivity reading can get really unwieldy. So for that, I tend to offer per word while pushing more for hourly, because unless it's a massive project, it usually doesn't take that long for me to do a sensitivity read, and my hourly rate is just kind of an estimate of about what the per word rate would be. In terms of a per word rate, I tend to think it's hilarious when I see postings that say they either do pay industry standard or they can't pay industry standard, because there is no such thing as industry standard. Industry standard is anywhere from 3 cents a word to 25 cents a word. And there's a lot of range in there. So my question to those people is like, which industry standards do you refer to? I will speak up in favor of royalties, but say that, you're never getting paid as much from them. You usually get them when they are specifically collaborations, usually you see them a lot with DM's Guild stuff and occasionally for other community created content stuff, like Scarred Lands has the Slurration Vault. I'm blanking on what Pathfinders is right now. I think it's just the Pathfinder community content. But you know what I mean, the community content things. OBS offers a really cool way to do revenue share on those that I wish Itch would do, because right now it's pretty much impossible to do shared revenue on one project on Itch, which sucks. That said, because those are all community content programs, you're giving a big cut of your pay to whoever owns the IP. So for DM's Guild, 50% of it is going to Wizards and to OBS. I think 30% to Wizards and 20% to OBS. It might be switched. But then, for Uncaged Goddesses, for example, we had, I think, 70, maybe 72 contributors. So out of that 50%, it's divided up 70 or 72 ways.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a big seller, but we're not getting a ton of money per sale on those books. So, I tend to think of those as like, you're doing this because you want to do it. It's a labor of love. You want to make something cool with your friends. You're not doing that to make a ton of money. I have done some projects where I got paid per word, and then they said, like, after X months, then you can sell this on your own and get royalties off of it, but that is extremely rare. Most people, if they're paying you per word, they own the words that you gave them.
Yeah, my whole thing, if you want to throw royalties on top of something, like as an icing, like if you're going to give me per word and royalties, sure. I just definitely I'm not a big royalties just in and of itself. And community content is a weird thing because, part of my thing with royalties is infrastructure. And since community content does go through drive-through and OBS and all that stuff, it means that there's a built-in infrastructure there. You're going to, even if it's a small amount, you're going to get paid. It's harder to do that when you accept royalties from an individual publisher. And, if they use drive-through to do that, then it becomes easier for them. But I've just worked with too many people who let stuff like that fall off.
Oh, I can absolutely see that. It's extra nice having a publisher account with drive-through because they just cut you a check every month. If you just have a contributor account, it just goes in there and you're only allowed to touch your money after a certain point of time. They might have changed this by now. This might be outdated information. But when I just had a contributor account, it was like, so here's how much money you have in your account, and here's how much you can actually access right now, and then there's a fee to access it. Whereas as soon as you get approved to have a publisher account, they're just like, well, it's the first of the month. Here's all your money right into PayPal.
Yeah, I think with drive-through, it is, you can use it as system credit immediately, or it's 30 days, I want to say. They might have shortened it down to 20.
Yeah, I remember they shortened it during COVID, but I don't know if that was like a permanent shortening or just a COVID relief thing.
I mean, I've never even heard about the differences of the different, accounts because, like, I literally didn't even have a drive-through account until I was already a publisher. So I've never even used a regular account.
I use my account for all of the royalties that I have for community content and everything like that. And I generally just make like enough money to be able to buy the books of the friends that have published stuff. So I have that stuff like that just to pay so I could pay other people and buy their books.
Living the dream.
I know, right?
I mean, that's kind of the freelancer joke, right? That we're all passing around the same $20 to each other.
Kind of true.
Yeah, with Goddesses, it was so funny, though, because we got so many submissions from really talented people, and we kept reaching out to a lot of them, like, so this is royalty share, right? Like, we don't actually have money for you. And most of them were like, yeah, this will just be a fun thing to do. Or it was, how Uncaged was for me, their first thing, like their first TTRPG they'd written. But yeah, we wanted to be very clear that, like, we can't pay you. We hope to eventually pay people in future projects. But this Uncaged has always been royalty share, and that's how most things on DM's Guild go.
Now, of course, like, it's been a while since I've looked for writing gigs. James, as somebody who's actually like new to the freelance game and you're like out there looking for gigs, what are you seeing offered right now?
Cool. Thanks for throwing the ball that way. I'm actually not looking at gigs actively, but part of my impetus was to accept Crystal's invitation was, who knows in the future, maybe I will have my act together that I can actually put to paper every idea I've got bouncing around my head, but also because people come to me and ask me, how do I get involved with this? And I never want to give anyone bad advice. So if I could steer a little bit, for those of you who are doing it, Itch was mentioned, Drive-Thru RPG was mentioned, Wizards Guild was mentioned. Explain to me, please, if you would not mind, what are the options and differences between these platforms? I think that'd be very cool to be something to know.
Oh, I would say I haven't worked too much with Itch, so I actually don't know much about it.
So Itch is primarily for video games, although in recent years it has come up a lot for TTRPGs, primarily independent TTRPGs. There's a lot of fun game jams that are always going on itch. I know every year is the Rainbow Jam, which is when you'll get a lot of fun queer games. A lot of my weird and wacky games came out as a result of itch game jams. There's one right now going on called Medieval But Queer. Thirsty Sword Lesbians, I believe, started on itch. I don't know if it was part of a jam, but that's there. The Wretched was initially there, and those are, it's kind of an indie haven. The problem is that it really makes, like, if it's as hard as it is to find things on DriveThruRPG, it is exponentially harder to find them on itch. Their navigation is really not creator or consumer friendly, and that is the main problem with them. But they're a great place, and they take a significantly less substantial cut than OBS.
But itch.io that's more just, it's like a place to sell stuff. It's not necessarily a place to connect there. Is there a way to connect
there
on there?
There are some forums on there, but yeah, it is primarily a place to sell. When I've made connections with people, it's primarily been in game jams that have forums where people can talk and collab. But again, you usually see collaborations more in video games. And they don't really actively encourage collaborations because there's no revenue sharing there. Although people do bundles, I'm in one right now. The Small Press Fantasy Bundle is a way for you to share revenue from your game with someone else on their game. And you see a lot of creator bundles being in the news for charity that tend to happen on itch. So like the trans rights bundle that had like 200 games in it that Rue ran. And there was like a Black Lives Matter bundle that made, that was in the news that had, I don't even remember how many games were in that one. But yeah, when you see like game designers band together to sell hundreds of games for cause, it's usually on itch.
I think nowadays it might be. I know back in the day it was usually drive-through. I actually got a lot of my people who got into my game. I got it from the very first charity bundle that drive-through did years ago for Haiti. It was the Save Haiti bundle or whatever, and I threw like my very first game in there, and that like blew up because like thousands of people bought that bundle. And it was like ridiculous. Sold so many copies of my game, and then people were interested and wanted to know more about the stuff that I was doing. Like I always suggest that if you have something, throw it in a charity bundle, because you never know who's going to contribute, or you never know who's going to buy that bundle. So from a purely marketing standpoint, it always helps to throw it in there. But also, you're also helping, the cause. It's with the Haiti thing. Like I was like, no, this is what I can do. I'll just put a game in. I guess this will work. But it just had the byproduct of just more people getting exposed to a game that they probably would not have purchased otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. And it is kind of funny seeing which of your games become like more popular based solely on what bundles they've been in. Also, drive-through now, I know like you can still do bundles with other creators, but they also do their own bundles. So like they did a COVID relief bundle, and they did an Australian wildfire relief one. There have been a few that they do.
And then if I could ask them, so what about Wizards of the Coast? Obviously, they have opened up to community content. What are your experiences with that? Like, hey, I'm a newbie freelancer. Should I steel myself towards WotC?
So that's where I got started. That's the DMs Guild. And I still publish on there. Not as prolifically as I used to, because I'm doing more freelancing for major companies. But as a way to build community, to get your stuff seen, to get noticed and make connections, I think DM's Guild is great. It's fairly easy to get stuff made. There are templates out there to make stuff that looks like professional D&D stuff. Like Laura Hersprinter's done one, and Nathaniel, I'm blanking, Rue has done several. So whether you want to use Word or Google Docs or Affinity or Photoshop, there are templates there that you can grab. And they have art packs that you can use. So you can make your stuff look pretty nice for no budget and use the Wizard's IP. The only thing you need to be mindful of is that you are only making 50% of whatever you charge. And also that certain things are off the table. So like you can't use Rick and Morty content. You can't use wild amount. Stuff like that. So check the terms and services there because they're strict.
And I guess my next question was going to be, what about cross-platform promotion? How reasonable or realistic is to say, I want to put this product of mine or product of ours if we're on a team, like I want to put it on Itch, I want to put it on Drive-Thru, and I want to put it on DM's Guild because I have made it a 5th edition D&D product. Like, how reasonable or legal is that?
So if you publish on DM's Guild, you can only publish on DM's Guild. That is and most of the community content programs have similar licensing things. Like when you publish it there, you can only publish it there. However, you can publish something on Itch and on Drive-Thru. There are 2 different ways to set up your publisher account. One is exclusive, saying that like I will only publish to Drive-Thru, and then you get 70% of your profits. The other is non-exclusive, which is the one that I have, which is to say you only get 60% of your profits, but you also get the ability to publish other places, like say Itch or your own website, or Kickstarter, or BackerKit, or whatever you want to do.
Right, but since the community content is basically through Drive-Thru, yeah, you're kind of saying, I'm only going to publish this
It depends. So, like, if you're putting something on DM's Guild, it's not necessarily on Drive-Thru, right? Like, you can find it through the same site, but it's not, they have different rules for publication. DM's Guild is its own thing.
Yes.
So like that was a lot, which is awesome.
That was a big tangent.
That
actually.
was
Yes.
Sorry.
That was fantastic. No. It was because like the different platforms and stuff can absolutely be confusing, and I am planning on doing a deep dive into those as well. And I'm looking forward to being able to talk a lot more in depth on those. We kind of talked about the different types of pay. So, and kind of like a range between pay. So we're going to kind of jump to, like, how much is too low? Because, like, for someone who's just starting out, they might think, oh, this is a lot for me because I'm new and inexperienced, and this will help get me the experience that I need. So, like, what would you consider to be too low for starting pay?
One thing I want to say is a common thing that I see when people are starting out is devaluing their own work and saying, yes, I'm new to this, so I shouldn't charge. Or I'm new to this, so I should charge significantly less than someone else. Just because you have less experience doesn't mean that your work has less value, and it doesn't mean it takes you less time to do than anyone else. If you are doing work, you should be getting paid for your work. And by not charging, you're lowering the standard of pay for literally everyone. That's my pay yourself
I would agree
spiel.
with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree too, though, that there is a difference between what you ask for versus what a company pays. You know, I have worked for some companies where I'm used to getting paid way more, but I really want to write for that company, but they pay less than what I would normally take or what I would normally negotiate for.
Absolutely.
But I'm like, I'll just do it because I kind of want to do this project.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've been in that situation as well, because sometimes they're like, look, this is what's in the budget. And that budget is usually poorly constructed, again, because all of us are gamers and we're not business people. So a lot of the time they're budgeting in for low amounts of pay for writers, even though they really should just go ahead and budget in for higher pay. But when I was the president of the IGDN, the Indie Game Developers Network, which is essentially a trade organization for RPG writers and designers, the big thing that we had was not necessarily like that we were fighting for unionization and all that stuff, but we definitely took a stand for our members and all of that stuff. And we had lots of conversations about it, because at the time there were companies that were paying 1 cent per word. And I remember at the time, like Onyx Path paid like 3, I think it was. And that was considered really good pay. And by the time I was done being president, like the standard, most people are paying at least 5 cents a word now. I won't take less than 5, definitely not less than 5. I usually expect a lot more. But like 5, like I don't even respect a publisher if they offer a gig to anyone, newbie or veteran, for less than 5 cents per word.
Yeah,
personally.
especially when, and I think this is happening less now, when you hear about certain publishers offering people of different genders different rates. That tends to really upset me on a multitude of levels. But I would...
I've literally never heard that.
I have never heard this either.
That's terrible.
And I am getting enraged just thinking about it.
Seriously.
With me, as far as how much is too low, like Eloy said, it's going to be based on like how much you really want to do this project. I won't accept anything less than 4 or 5 cents a word. I've gone all the way up to about 16 cents a word, for certain projects. And so you really kind of have to figure out, like, what is your passion for the project, and don't lowball yourself because it's your first project.
I want to tag off of that and say that a lot of times, like Eloy said, a lot of publishers know that we want to write for these projects, and I think a lot of the, but you'll be writing for book is factored into the pay, and I sure wish that it weren't, because I have taken 4 cents a word on projects I was really passionate about, but my ask is 12 cents a word. And that really hurt my wallet.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and what I will say is that opportunity to write for certain projects, that's a huge deal. And I was offered the ability to write up the Bali for Clan Book for Vampire for V20. And I didn't even ask how much it was, because I was like, hell yeah, I want to write up the Bali, because I want to see how many people I can piss off with this write-up. And so they could have paid me nothing. I would have done it for free. Because that's one of those like pet clans that everybody everybody hates every write-up. So yeah, like that was a really fun one for me. I would have done it for free. But that passion that...
Don't tell them that.
Well, they already paid me now. But that passion that you have when you go into a project like that. So when I wrote on the Firefly RPG, for instance, I wrote up my stuff and I was super excited because I was adding to the world and it was wonderful. And then like another writer dropped off, and you know what they did? They said, "You want his section too?" And I said, "Hell yeah." So like that passion and really wanting to write the thing is a huge deal. Because I've also written on projects that I was like, it's a paycheck, I'll write it, whatever. But those ones that I really love, like, I get a kick out of those. And, I think that people who I'm writing for can feel that.
I also think that when, and this is going to, I'm thinking of a thread that James Hake did a while back on freelancer rates, where he mentioned, I don't remember how much I agreed with the entire thing, but part that really stuck out to me was like, if you're paying somebody, say, 20 or 25 cents a word, like MCDM does, that project is getting your freelancers full attention.
Right.
If you are paying an established person 5 cents a word, you are getting 5 cents a word worth of their time, because they have to take on so many other projects.
And that's kind of why I like the flat pay ones. The flat pay ones, and you know, because it'll just be, hey, we need you to do this. This is how much we're offering, not per word, just like this lump sum money. Do you want it? You know, and that's an easy way. You can just say, well, no, if it was a little bit higher, I would take it, you know. And you can, it's easier to negotiate with that. Per word is one of those weird things that, like, I always take the per word and, you know, multiply it by the word count that's being proposed. And I always do all of that stuff to get a lump sum anyway. And then I make a value whether what I need to write is worth the full amount that they're going to pay me. Because per word is so easy to get lost in. You know, some people will be like, well, you know, 3 cents, you know, 5 cents, 7 cents, you know, it's just like, it sounds like, oh, it's only 1 cent, 2 cents off, but like, it freaking adds up depending upon the size of the project, you know. So,
it sure does.
So
Yeah,
you don't want to get lost in the 1 cent, 2 cent fight there. Just do the math and just be like, this big number here now, is that worth the work that you're going to be doing?
I also really appreciate when project leads, if they are putting it as a per word thing, will say, like, we're going to pay X amount per word for X number of words for a total amount of number.
Yep.
And then as long as you're within like 100 words or 1,000 words, depending on the size of the project, you get that amount. Right, because they don't want you to turn in something that's massively over count, but they also don't want you to turn in something that is incredibly under. Because, you know, I've been a writing director. You don't want your writers padding their writing just to meet a quota.
I have literally redlined the hell out of people's stuff because I'll be like, you repeated yourself for 5 paragraphs. No, thank you. You have another 1,000 words now to write for me because I will not accept these ones.
Oh, so this actually, I had a question on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to bring it up at the right moment. So I am a newbie writer. Hello, you have offered me 4 cents a word. Give me more details on that. Is that going to be 4 cents on the words that I have submitted? Is that going to be 4 cents on the words that you're willing to publish? You just mentioned, you know, up to X amount. But let's say that language is missing from the agreement. What should I expect when I accept a per word contract? And what red flags should I look out for as well?
So what I'll say is
question.
Very good question. If the contract says that they pay you for the words used in the book, no. Like, just say no. I've done those before where I've written many words. But then, you know, there was a change in the project and they only ended up using half of them. So they paid me for half. And I'm like, what about the other half? They're like, well, if we end up using them, then we'll pay you for that when it goes into the other book that maybe it might go into. And I'm like, no, thank you. Like, no, just, and that's why in my scenario that I had given you was, if somebody gives me a draft, I'm going to pay them for what I accept from them. But there will be red lines and whatnot. So I will say, I will not accept this. Please write more. Please strike this and write different words that I am willing to pay you for. But yes, you definitely pay for what you turn in.
Yeah, in my experience, it is typically, and it is not always spelled out exactly in contracts, so I'm really glad you asked this question, but usually what is expected is that you turn in your words, you get your edits, or in very rare cases, they just edit for you. I know some of the mid to larger houses will just do that. You submit your draft and then you might never hear from them again until, you know, publication and money shows up in your PayPal. But generally, at least in the experiences that I've had, you submit your words, your writing director or whoever you're working with comes back and is like, we'd like these changes. Then you submit the new draft. And then that person says, okay, you're good to invoice.
Right.
Whatever they do after that is on them.
Mm-hmm.
They might realize they need to cut whole paragraphs out of it to fit into layout. Funky things might happen during proofreading, but my part is done.
Yeah. One of the most annoying things to me is when they just edit it. Because usually, if they don't even come back to me for red lines or anything like that, then I will get a copy of the book and I will not recognize my sections. You know?
Same.
And it is...
You're like, what is this?
Same.
I'll be like, I didn't write this. Wait a minute.
And it's so hard to put it in your portfolio because you don't want to show off something you didn't write.
Yeah. And not even that it's bad, but it's just not what I wrote. You know what I mean? So it's just, yeah, exactly. I've had that happen a couple of times. You know, it being self-published and writing my own stuff, and then going out and freelancing and having all of these experiences, what that does for me as a publisher too is it it teaches me what I don't want to do to my people. You know, so when people come to me and write on my books, like, I make sure that they have ample time to make sure that they write what they want to get out and that they're writing all the words, and I pay them up front, and, you know, I try to do all of these things. I don't edit away their flavor and their words, and, you know, because otherwise I didn't hire you so that you could just write words and then I take it and I just make it sound like me. Like, I want your voice in there. Otherwise, I'd hire a monkey to write.
I was going to say, I model a lot of how I do my development process off of what you've shown me, Eloy, actually. And, like, how I approach talking to people.
Well, this just kind of popped in my head listening to what you all, like, had the, oh yeah, samesies when Eloy mentioned, you know, they edit your work without running it by you, and now you don't recognize your own words. And then Jess mentioned your portfolio. So how acceptable or non-accepted or gauche is it to say in your portfolio, yes, this is what I submitted to company XYZ, and what you saw published was, you know, edited without my knowledge or something like that? Like, is that something worth saying, or is that just immediately you've put a red flag on yourself?
I don't know. It's kind of an interesting question because for me, my portfolio rarely includes at like actual like page grabs of the book. I just say, "Hey, I wrote," you know. So you know, if they really want to like dig into it, I could go line for line and tell you what I wrote and what was edited away. But you know, a lot of the time, just knowledge that your name is in the credit of a certain book is enough to sometimes persuade people to give you a shot on another book. So, I mean, that's just kind of the appeal of it. That's why you kind of almost want to get onto some of those larger projects, because then it's like, ooh, they were on, you know, this one. Ooh, maybe I want them in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, it's a thing. You know, I mean, for me, like, again, like I wrote on Firefly. I would say Firefly is like the biggest, you know, giant thing that I ever wrote on. And the only reason that I say that, because it wasn't necessarily bigger than other things, but that it was overseen by Fox. And by putting stuff into the game, we were literally shaping the Firefly universe. Like, it went onto the wiki and had to be approved by legal and all that stuff. Like, it was a big deal. You know, so like when I was writing the book and I submitted, I was just like, you know, we never talk about Zoe's family, so I'm going to write up a character who's Zoe's brother. And then I was just like crossing my fingers that, you know, it was going to come back, and it ended up being her cousin. But like now officially she's got a cousin that I wrote up. You know, like that's
cool.
That's pretty dope. That's a pretty dope feeling. Like,
That's
Fox
awesome.
Approved, you know, Fox approved her having a cousin. You know, so
That's so cool.
Yeah.
My CD has the parts of the book that I wrote on. So, like, for instance, with Pip System, I wrote a lot of the archetypes and magic systems and stuff like that, so I have that listed on there. For Chicago by Night, I did the Kindred History. I have that written on there. And I'll have, like, if I did development or editing for it, then that way if somebody does want to see some of that stuff, they can kind of pick apart on their own. But it's stuff that I know that this is what I wrote, so here you go.
Yeah, it's so hard to like go back to what it was like when I was first starting to try and get gigs. It's like it's like at this point, like, and I'm not gloating or anything, but I'm kind of like a known factor, like in the industry at this point, that people will come to me and they'll be like, "Hey, Lloyd, do you want to write on this?" And I'll like half the time I'm like, "Actually, I don't have time. I'm sorry." So it's so hard to go back to the beginning because I remember the hustle. Oh my gosh. The hustle of sending like tons of emails to all these open calls, just hoping that they were going to respond and not just instantly reject you. Oh man, it's just terrible. Like that was one of the things that when I started my company, Third Eye Games, a big thing that I wanted to do was every new book that I was doing, I wanted at least one or two people who had never written before. Like I would take brand new writers and I would give them their shot because I remember how hard it was to get that first shot. And so and I still try to stick to that. And Crystal, you've been really good with the PIP system of bringing in brand new writers and stuff with that. And I try to do it with some of the other game like well nowadays. I have such a great stable of writers that it's hard for me to be like, no, I'm not going to give this gig to this writer that I've been working with for years and they write amazingly and now give it to a new person. But I still try to give it to new people here and there.
That was a big thing we wanted to do with Uncaged Goddesses too, and I'm sorry I'm not gonna shut up about it, but it was the most recent thing I writing directed.
It's awesome. Keep talking about it. It's
fun. Just because we specifically we had, I think, 228 writing submissions and like 221 artist submissions for that or something absurd. And so what we really wanted were people who had never written before for a TTRPG, along with industry veterans. And with editors, people who had edited, like people who could, pass an editing test, right? But maybe hadn't edited TTRPGs. Maybe they had done books along with industry veterans. And with artists, obviously, it all came down to their portfolios. But I know one thing that Gwen and David, the producers, consciously did was take artists of varying levels in an attempt to, on their end, art direct to help mold or tutor up and coming talent in the same way that I was doing on the writing side. And because we had such a collaborative environment, right, you have people like Jesse Heinig, who helped create the first Fallout game and had worked at White Wolf forever, along with people who are like, oh, hey, this is my first thing I've ever written. I'm excited to be here. And like seeing their two different perspectives on the same project and like the very different ideas they have, how they shaped each other's designs. It was very cool.
I like Eloy mentioned with the PIP system primer, I try to get people who have never written mixed in with people who have written and want to write for the PIP system. And in fact, some of our writers on the PIP system have gone on to write for some pretty big name games and even get nominated for Ennies this past year as well, which is really cool.
100%. I'm always hoping that anybody who, works with me when they're small, I hope that they all surpass me. That's what I want. I want everybody to just jet past me.
Right? I'm like, how far can you go? I want to see like what you can create and what's amazing, because it can only stand to make this industry better.
Exactly. I mean, and that's definitely something that I learned from doing, like I said, doing the class with Central Michigan University. Is I had a classroom full of like these game designers who all actually had pretty amazing games. They just needed that last little push, that last little bit of confidence that I was able to give them by kind of just giving them a rundown, like, this is how you design a game. And obviously, from my perspective, there's a billion different ways to design a game. But like, just to see how many of them already had pretty like great ideas, and they just needed like a little nudge or a little piece of inspiration that hopefully I was able to give each and every one. They all left the class very happy. So I'm hoping to play some of their games. They were really
Right? That would be awesome. I can't wait to see the results of that.
Oh, I was just going to say, having tutored a lot of new upcoming designers at this point, I think the hardest thing for a lot of up-and-coming designers, not freelancing, but making their own project, is just getting something on the page. And for that, just get it on the page, because nobody else can play it if it lives in your head.
100%. Oh my gosh. That's a big deal for me. I will write a trash system and then go back and like fiddle with it until it's not trash anymore. But if you don't write that version
that's
of
the
it,
part I need to do.
Yes. Just write it and then you fiddle
I write the trash part and just release it into the world.
Well, I mean, that's also an option. I don't think that's the strategy I would go, but you can do that. I've seen many games do that.
Okay, so we've kind of talked about different pay. We went off on tangents, which is awesome. I love this conversation that we're having. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was with negotiation and pay. Like, and that can kind of tie back to contracts, but I feel like negotiating pay is something that people shy away from. Because my personal experience in my teaching career has been anytime that I have asked about pay, I have never been offered the job. Anytime I don't ask about pay, I usually get offered that job.
Mm.
So...
Oh, that's fascinating.
I know, right? And so I have almost mentally turned to, you never negotiate pay. You never negotiate pay. And I feel like there's this mentality of flipping that on its head, and I am fully in support of it, but how do you even go about doing that? I know I have actually had, I've never talked with you about this, Eloy, but I've had people negotiate pay for PIP system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and specifically it was for SIFWA, which is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, where they actually have an industry minimum, and I did not realize that when I offered them that position, or offered them a job for writing for PIP, and I believe it's like 15 cents a word. It was pretty high.
Well, and of course the way that we work with the PIP system nowadays is I let Crystal mostly run the show. And she tells me how much money to send to people. So, like, I trust her to do the negotiation for me. And, I'll just send whatever you tell me.
And that's worked pretty well.
So far.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to a consensus, but we parted on actually good terms.
Yeah.
Because I said, because the PIP system is small, my budget's a little bit smaller. However... they're on my radar for larger PIP system games and not just the primer.
There you go.
So we were still able to have a I'm going to say peaceful, but that's not quite exactly how it is. But we walked away both from that experience without any negative feelings towards each other. In fact, they're a person that I actually respect. I love the work that they have written on. I still continue to support them and write and everything like that. So, and that was a new experience for me as a developer, because usually you put your stuff out there and you make the offer and people just accept it, but there is no negotiation. So, has anybody ever had negotiation experience with pay, and how did you start that, or any tips that you might have?
I negotiate all the time. It rarely works out. Because the issue is that so many of the publishing companies set their budgets way before they go to hire freelancers. They make their whole budget for the book. And, but a lot of times what they offer is, less than that to which I am accustomed to being paid. However, there are a couple of companies or projects that I really like, or I really like the people who are running them, and I really want to work on it. So if they're like, hey, we're going to pay you, I don't know, like 5 cents a word or something, it's usually my response is, wow, I'm so flattered to be, asked to be on this project. I'm very excited about it. If I am, I'm not going to lie if I don't care. But, my typical asking rate is 12. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? And sometimes they come back and are like, yeah, why don't we do 6? Rarer, they're like, why don't we do 7? Most of the time, they're like, unfortunately, our budget is for 5. Although a couple companies will add the caveat of like, this is 5, but once you're in with the company, I can put it in your contract that on your next project with us, you'll be getting 6 or something like that. So in that way, negotiation has paid off, but never once has anyone been like, oh yeah, we'll definitely pay you 12 when we initially offered 5. But they've also never told me to just like go away forever.
Yeah. And honestly, for me, it's a matter of how much time is negotiation going to end up taking. Because if it's a project that I'm really excited for and they kind of lowball me, then I might say, well, could you sweeten the pot a little bit? And then if they don't, then okay, cool. I mean, like whatever. But if they're lowballing me and it's a project I don't care about, I go, you know what? I just really don't have the time to take on more projects. But thank you so much for the offer. But what I find a lot is the longer you're in it, the more comfortable you are with talking pay. And I mean, you should never, I feel like if the publisher is scared to talk pay, because that I've had that happen before too, where they're like, well, I mean, pay is kind of, it's like, all right, spit it out. Like, how much is it going to be? Like, we're all adults here. Like, let's just figure out how much this is going to do, and then if I'm going to take it or not. So, I mean, a lot of...
If a publisher is uncomfortable to talk pay, that makes me nervous that they will not pay me.
Yes, exactly.
Yep, exactly.
But also, like, I always encourage, like, most of the jobs that I take nowadays is, hey, Eloy, we would love for you to come and write on this project. We're paying this much, which would mean that you're going to end up getting this much. Or, hey, we're paying a flat fee. Is that cool? Like, it's like the amount that you're getting paid is always part of the pitch nowadays. For me. And I think it's just because I'm kind of a known entity, and I think people realize that, I honestly, I don't have the time to like, all right, well, I guess it sounds good. How much do you pay? Like, if I have to ask you, like, if you didn't tell me up front, like, come on now. Like, what are we here? Are we children on the playground? We're trying to, hide and go seek with the money here. Like, come on, like, it's a business.
Yeah, that is probably the most common thing that I respond to people is when they reach out and are like, hey, we're hiring for a project and we want to hire you. Are you interested? Maybe they'll tell me one sentence about it. And my response is always, it depends on the deadline, the scope, and the paper word.
Yeah.
Those, like, the project sounds interesting, but I can't say yes or no until I know the important details.
Exactly. And those are the important details. And I have written those emails back as well. Well, I need to know deadlines and, when you need it by and how big is the project and how much you're going to pay. And if those three things... Am I
writing 1,000 words?
Those 3 things. Those are the 3 things that you need, right? Like, it's when is it due? How big is it? How much are you paying? Done. Like, if you can't tell those things up front, then maybe you shouldn't be hiring right now. Maybe you need to work those things out and then start reaching out.
100%.
So James, did you have any questions or comments about negotiations?
No, I think I was going to say, hey, any red flags we should look at, but they came up very quickly, and I distinctly heard the tone of voice of experience there. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Also, the problem with this...
Have those burns fully healed yet?
Some of them, some of them. Honestly, though, the problem with it as well is sometimes it is experience, and sometimes a company might present themselves, or not even a company, a person that you and it is trying to hire you, whether it be a developer or the publisher, that sort of thing. They might put on a front and seem like they're going to treat you good, and then in the end they don't. I mean, and that's kind of just something
Yeah.
learn along the way. I've been burned in this industry, and I'm not going to name names or anything. But then I just know not to work with those people. And if any of my friends, people who I consider friends, bring up these people, then I make sure to warn them, because that is one thing about the gaming industry is it's not as big as you might think it is. So we all kind of know each other. We all kind of talk. Just saying.
I come from the opera world, and TTRPG is even smaller than that, which I thought was like the smallest pool. But games, it's so small. So small. And word gets around.
Exactly.
So this is the question I was alluding to, Crystal, if I could jump in on this.
Yeah, go right ahead.
And I'm going to speak slowly in case it needs editing. In my experience from the outside and even prior to getting involved in the industry, there were these horror stories from companies now that don't exist. First one that comes to mind is Guardians of Order. I know crashed and burned, owing a lot of people a lot of money. And then you've got issues with people like Zach S. That was kind of an open secret for a while. We have the situation with Jameson Stone and Satine Phoenix right now. And then there's a lot of veterans in the industry who are showing new colors with TSR debacles. You say it's not that big of an industry, but again, hi, let's present myself as the rookie here. How do I find out if I've accepted a deal with a rotten apple? Like, is there a freelance writers Discord or Facebook group or something of that sort? I know there's websites like the Not Another Dime for Ken Whitmore, but that's one spot and that's one person.
Yeah.
There is a DMs Guild Creators Discord. There's also a Drive-Thru RPG Publishers Discord. They're both very busy and have a lot of people going in there. I personally get overwhelmed in both of them because there's just so many people. But those are a good place to make connections. I know the DMs Guild one has an industry politics chatter, a thread, chatter, what the hell, Jess, where people do discuss those issues and kind of look out for one another. I don't know if the drive-through one has something similar, but there are resources like that. I know the Storytelling Collective also has a Discord and similar things, but it is really hard for new people who don't know, because it's one thing if I'm newer to the industry than Eloy or Crystal by far. I've only been here since 2018. That's what, 4 years? Yeah. Is that how time works? 4 years?
Kind of.
Yeah. So there are some people that I might work with that both of you are like, oh, no. But I would have no idea. Yeah. And I know some of those people for someone who is brand new. But if we're not communicating, we have no way. And I know there have been attempts where someone on Twitter is like, I will make a list of bad actors. But it's so way to manipulate. Right, because those lists are so easy to manipulate. And it's so easy for people who do intend harm to put, their victims on that kind of list.
I honestly have been offended that I have not been on more woke lists. Just because, like, every time
I know.
these are a bunch of woke.
You haven't received.
And I'm like, wait, where's
you haven't received your medal for personally ruining tabletop gaming yet?
Seriously, I think I have contributed to the downfall of tabletop just as much as those other companies.
Right.
I literally put on my press kit that I have single-handedly ruined multiple licensed products and am available to ruin yours.
And people's childhoods is how I think about it.
I was gonna say, my advice is that when you are working on a project, make sure that you're communicating with the other freelancers, because I feel like the more that freelancers communicate with each other, the more things will come out sooner, or problems can be talked about and hopefully addressed in a positive way. But like, I generally will not talk about like personal opinions of companies and stuff like that in public. If someone comes up to me and says, hey, I've been approached by this company or this person to write on this project, do you know anything about them? I'll share anything that I, like if I've had conversations with them, if I've written for them, or anything like that. And because there are people that I may not get along with that they might, and they might not be a problematic person. It's just personality doesn't work together. If somebody comes up to me and is like, hey, Zach asked me to write on something, I'm like, no. Like,
yeah.
I have things.
Get out while you can.
Yeah, we have to have a very serious discussion then of some things, So there, it is extremely subjective, but it's also, you have to know where to find information, and that is the toughest part. So I was going to say that, making connections with each other and building your own network of people to reach out to for help or advice or anything like that is really important.
I just want to tag in on that really quick. In that, also, when you're on a project, the more open communication your team has, generally, the more cohesive the project is.
Yes.
And a lot of freelance projects silos their creative teams. They're like, well, here, you're going to write the adventure, and you're going to write the monsters, and you're going to write the subclasses, and you're going to do this art, and you'll do that art. And nobody knows what anybody else is working on. And then when the producer comes to put it all together, shockingly, it's disjointed. Mm-hmm. If your team can have a lot of internal communication, they, like Crystal said, they can see when things are wrong, like ethically, but also your product is just better and cohesive.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that one thing that my wife taught me is how to social media stalk people. So it, like, pretty much immediately, like even just before coming on to this recording with you guys, I looked you two up. And I'm like, okay, who are the people who I'm about to go talk to? Are there crazy things happening?
Yeah. And you still wanted to talk with me? Really?
Yes.
And you discovered how obnoxious we really were.
Well, and really, it's not necessarily to weed out obnoxious people, because then I would never talk on any podcasts. But it's more to make sure that I'm not jumping into, well, Eloy was on a conversation with that person who, got called out for this, that, or whatever. And I'm just like, okay. But I mean, I honestly feel like, anytime you're trying to apply for a job, the person who's in any job, not just in RPGs, but any job, they're going to check your social media and see what you're putting on there. And I don't think that it should be different for the person trying to get the job either. So I'm not going to apply for a job until I have looked into that company to know if that's even a place I want to work. So I feel like, there has to be a little bit of social media and internet stalking, just because that's just how it works nowadays.
So many things solved by, like, Googling name followed by the word scandal.
Hell yeah.
Or name followed by the word me too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. So, James, did you have any other follow-up questions with that?
No, that was a big one. Just because I've been on the peripheral of that happening. Obviously, Crystal, you and I have been speaking to what happened with you, but like for me as a just as a hobbyist, I remember coming to Gen Con one year. I mean, I think it's safe to talk about Guardians of Order because they haven't been a thing for ages. I remember showing up to Gen Con one year and they just weren't there. And I remember going to a few writers that I knew work with them, and I could see the strain on their face to keep from grinding their teeth as they explained how they were still owed money by Guardians of Order. So,
Well, and their owner is kind of back now and made a lot of money with that anime Kickstarter. So I have concerns for the fact that a lot of people don't remember what happened with Guardians of Order.
Mm-hmm.
oh, Anime 5e was him? I didn't know that.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Very briefly, we kind of talked about like don't work for free, don't pay an exposure, but I have done work for like trade. So like I am not good at layout. Like layout is like the last thing I ever want to do on a project. I will edit. I will do art before I do a layout. um and so like I have done for community content trade where I will do editing or something on someone else's work and they'll do layout for me. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know like a lot of people have very different thoughts on that, but it is a form of pay technically, um, because it's a trade, but some people don't like doing that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't personally mind bartering. I've done it a couple of times, but it's not my go-to. I am very happy to pay people for for the things that they do. Um, I think bartering really comes down to when when money is a concern. For me, I expect to be paid for the stuff that I do. So I like to pay people for the things that they do. Now, if they are like, well, you don't have to pay me and you can do layout for me instead, okay. Well, I mean, but then it's kind of what we talked about before. Well, what's the scope of the project and what's the deadline? Because if it doesn't really fit, then I'll just give you some money, and then you can use that to go hire somebody else. Uh, that's just my thought on it. I don't mind doing it. I've done it a couple of times, but nothing like cold hard cash.
I think it's a great way if you're first starting out to get access to the things that you need that you can't do, and also make connections with people who can do those things. Unfortunately, writing is not something that a lot of artists and layout people are looking for. However, if you do make friends with, another writer, talk to them and you can edit each other's stuff, right? You might not be as skilled as an actual editor, but any eyes on your work besides yours by someone who knows your game, knows the mechanics you're doing, are going to be helpful. So if you are just starting out, you don't have a budget, you don't have any money, grab somebody else in the industry and be like, hey, I know Photoshop. I would love to lay out your game. Can you edit mine? Or something to that effect. Like, I've had plenty of friends who we edited each other's games and just gave each other like special thanks in the each other's stuff, and that's how we made our no budget games.
The key word there for me, again, I'm the noob, is like, oh, these were friends. You already had built this established trust and relationship. This is not well-established company coming to you and saying, hey, want to work for exposure.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. These were people that I had worked with on previous projects. And then it was like, hey, I'm doing a new thing. I would love for you to help me on it, and I could help you on your project. Definitely not a company.
Yeah. And yeah, anybody who tells you that they're going to pay you an exposure, I think that's a pretty well worn path these days.
Yeah.
People know you don't take that gig. Again, like I feel bad. I've had people who are like, "I love your game. I'll write up stuff for free," and I'll be like, "No, you won't. I will pay you for
Yep.
right." It's like no, you will not work for free because again, I expect to get paid for my stuff. I'm going to try to take advantage of somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And I've had people come up and say like, "Oh, like I'll write for Pip System. You don't have to worry about paying me." I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. No. That's not going to work. You're going to get money, and we can talk about that when we
Now,
get
with the
there."
PIP
But
system, it's a little bit different, right? Because if they want to write something for PIP, but they don't want us to pay them, then they can write it for the community content. So it's like
oh yeah,
they can
absolutely.
always go that route. It just won't be in an official PIP book. It'll be part of the
Yeah.
community content. So at least with that system, there's an outlet there for those people who want to do it for free. But I get a lot of people who are like jazzed about AMP, and they're like, "Oh, I came up with this really cool power." And if I'm in the market for some powers, I'll say send it over, and I'll pay you for it. It's like it's
Nice.
okay. This is
Yeah.
an interesting thing because a lot of the biggest question when it comes to freelancing is like, how do you even get the gig? And for me as a publisher, a lot of the time it just requires that you showed some interest, and then I'll give you a shot. Like I've had a bunch of people just be like, "Man, I really love your game, and I kind of came up with this cool thing that I wrote up," and I'll look at it, I'll be like, "Cool, yeah, that looks pretty good. You want to come write on the next book?" You I'll give it a shot. I don't care.
If you look at the publishers, so many of them have a thing on there under the job site or the About Us site that says, like, most of them aren't hiring right now. But if you have something you want to submit, they tell you how to go about doing that.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them are more lengthy than others. Some of them tell you exactly what to submit, like 500 words on whatever. But others are just like, hey, shoot us an email with what you want to write and your portfolio or something that you think is cool.
Yeah, see, I'm off the radar. Like, I have to either be lurking in a forum somewhere, or like I just have to see a social media post or something. And yeah, because I don't have anything like that on my site. I'm never hiring officially, but I'm also always hiring.
This is where I, again, bang my know your worth and get paid for your work drum.
Exactly.
So if you're approaching these people and say, I love your game, I want to write for it for free, just stop after the I love your game, I want to write for it.
100%. 100%. Because there are publishers out there that will let you. Don't do that to yourself. I don't let people write stuff for me for free, but like some people be like, sure, you can totally come write for free. Yeah, don't fall into that trap.
Well, there are even Kickstarters where it's like, if you pay this amount, you get to write a thing for us. And I'm like, why would you pay? Why are you paying to write? That's backwards.
Yeah.
I don't understand that either.
Let me see. I think I've done that in a couple of things. I've done that in a Kickstarter before, but it was less that you would write a thing. It was that you could come up with an idea and then we would write it into the game, but it would be your idea that would be part of the world then at that point. And that can be good. Yeah, I'm not going to make somebody pay to actually write the thing. That's kind of crazy.
Speaking again from myself and my perspective, if we brought it up earlier, actually. I can't remember which of you three brought it up, but if I'm getting paid a decent amount, I have the motivation to finish it. And if I'm slacking, that can be held against me. If I'm an unpaid, I will do this for free, where's the motivation other than, oh, this is very cool? Where's the experience? Where's the checks and balances?
If there are writers that I really like, sometimes I'll prepay them. Be like, hey, like I really want you invested in this, so here's all your money up front because I know you're good for it. Uh, and and I don't mind doing that. I do that for some of my established writers. They'll be like, hey, do you have a project coming up? And I'll be like, no, but I got a few extra $100. I'm gonna throw this at you so that you're ready for the next project. And I keep good books. Yeah, so not everybody is a good accountant, a good bookkeeper. I've gotten much better along the way, so I can keep track of that sort of thing. So then I'll be like, hey, I did, hey, it's time to write that thing. I'm going to add on some more words here. I'm going to pay you more, but I'm going to knock off the amount that I gave you earlier. And sometimes that's good motivation to stick with a company, is that they'll be like, they'll give me money and I haven't even written anything yet. That's pretty cool. I don't do it, but
The
I do it
freelancer equivalent of a
sometimes.
retainer.
It's kind of like a retainer, yeah. But literally, I just do it out of the blue sometimes.
All right, so we're kind of coming up to the end, and there's one other thing that I wanted to talk about, because it is also something that this has been an ongoing discussion for many, many years, led by a lot of industry professionals and organizations such as the IGDN. But it's how can we make the pay better, because we've kind of mentioned it briefly, but the RPG industry pays really, really little compared to other industries. Like other writing industries, we don't even really come close to what they're paying currently. So is there things that we can do as freelancers, or seek out, or organizations that are kind of helping to drive this that we can support? So what are your thoughts and feelings on this?
One thing that I think has helped is, and we've seen this on DM's Guild, we've seen it, I think, a little bit on Drive-Thru, we've seen it a lot on Itch, is creators raising their prices. And this is less from a freelancing side, but this is like the standard price for like an anthology or a 200 to 300 page book on DM's Guild like 5 years ago was, I think, $12. The original Uncaged anthologies were like 14 or 15. Now, standard price for an anthology or that size book is about $20. And that's such a fantastic shift in terms of getting people paid what they're worth. In terms of paying freelancers, I know a lot of people, myself included, have been very vocal on Twitter, pushing for 10 cents a word being an industry standard. I know there's a lot of pushback to that from companies. But I think MCDM and companies of that size being very vocal about like, hey, forget 10 cents a word, we pay 25 cents a word, hopefully will encourage other companies to pay something more equitable. And I have never written for Paizo, but I know that their unionization will have ramifications throughout the industry.
Yeah, what I'll add to that too is
unionization, not unification. Yes. You know what I mean.
I did. I knew what you meant. I feel like the raising of the price of the items is super duper important, but I also feel like this is something that I pushed a lot again when I was in the IGDN, was publishers holding other publishers accountable for that sort of thing. And like, again, nowadays I'll clown somebody if they're trying to offer me 2 cents a word, 3 cents a word. I'll be like, no, thank you. But I think the raising of the prices is the big thing. Like in the video game industry, it's weird, right? Video games versus tabletop stuff. The consumer's mind is also like, this is how much something should cost. And we all get really mad at like how expensive textbooks are, for instance. But literally, those are super expensive to make. Like what we're making in the game industry are literally giant textbooks for games. So like really, we should be charging close to $100, $150 for these giant hundreds of page tomes that we're writing with full color art and hardcover and glossy pages and all that. It should probably cost way more than we are charging. But the way that the industry is prices have kind of stayed around the same. And the reason I was bringing up video games is video games figured it out, and that's where microtransactions came from. Because literally, video games should not cost $60 anymore. They cost $60 10 years ago.
They cost $60 in the 80s.
So like there's zero reason why a game should cost $60. And games are more expensive to make, but they're staying the same price, and people get mad that they're trying to make more money with microtransactions. We basically just need to figure out the formula for tabletop RPGs. Because right now we don't have one. It's just right now it's like we put a bunch of work into our games and then if we charge too much, people won't buy it. If you charge too little, you're not making enough to really even make the next thing. And it's always a balancing act.
I'm looking at this now on the retailer end because I was in the industry when board games were $20, $30, and I distinctly remember when Agricola came out, first edition Agricola, and the $60 board game. Who in their right mind is going to pay $60 for a board game? And
Laughs in
lo and
Gloomhaven.
behold,
Right?
exactly. Um, and so I'm wondering, are we starting to see that turn though? Because people will talk about the D&D PHB is a small book and it's $50. And now we've got independent things like Hard West, I think MSRP's for $85, and it is a meaty boy. And Coyote and Crow is MSRP's for $70. And these are two of like the indies hotness right now.
Mm-hmm.
So with the success of these two, do you think we're possibly seeing that as that Agricola moment, possibly?
I think so. I've already started charging more for my products too, just because I'm seeing that that's a way to kind of help shift everything to, everything being a little bit more equitable and people being able to make the amount of money that it actually requires to make these games the way that people want them. Like if people still want to pay, $40 for a core book, well, then it's not going to be full color. It's not going to have a hardcover. I'm not going to spend that much on art. It's not going to be 500 pages. It'll be like 150. It's just like you get what you pay for. And that's the problem is right now they are getting way more. And I say they as in like I don't buy a ton of games too. The consumer in the gaming industry is getting way more bang for their buck than in other industries, and I think that's what it is.
Then I think they realize.
Yeah, I think they realize it, and that's why we need to charge more bucks. Yeah.
One thing that I hope we can see moving forward is especially with more games moving to online only and the use of virtual tabletops, is consumers being more willing to pay for PDF only books and pay higher rates for them as well. Because I know it's funny, it seems like in indie stuff, like they're like, oh yeah, of course I'll pay, top dollar for a PDF only project because that's what you expect from an indie publisher. But I know some medium-sized companies that I've written for were doing PDF only releases. And a lot of the fans pushed back really hard because they were like, why do I need to pay for something that should be free? You're not shipping anything to my house, so this didn't cost anything to make. Kind of forgetting that we still had to write the book and artists still had to art the book and layout still had to lay out the book and editors still had to edit the book. It's not just, PDFs don't appear out of thin air. And I think getting consumers more accustomed to PDF only stuff, virtual tabletop, tied in stuff is going to also help with that, especially with the cost of paper and cardboard and shipping being so high right now.
Yeah. I just want to point out that I love the phrase artists still have to art the book. Because I like it because like
Thank you for accepting my broken English.
No, I like it because honestly all the other ers, if you take the off, that is what they do. Writers write, editors edit, all this stuff, but it was like artists, I guess they art. Yeah, I found it very funny. I apologize for curtailing that. Yes, I'm sorry. But yes, I agree with you wholeheartedly. What I usually do when I'm selling my book is I usually sell the PDF for half of the cost of the physical book. So if it's a more expensive book, it's a more expensive PDF. And for me, that's a big deal because what I see when someone buys for me is they are buying the game. So essentially they are buying the PDF, and then if they want to pay extra, then they can get a physical copy of it, is the way that my brain thinks about it. So it's almost less that I'm charging half of the physical book for the PDF, and more that I'm charging double the PDF for a physical book.
People are always complaining about how like companies don't give away free PDFs with the purchase of a book, and I'm like, you do realize that the PDFs still cost money, and that there's actually like a different way to lay it out than when you're doing a print run. So there's a lot more that goes into the book and the PDF than you're thinking.
Oh my gosh. And as someone who has PDFs that have not been properly optimized as well,
Yeah, that's
oh
a
my
whole other
God. All right,
thing.
I flipped the page. Now I got to wait 30 seconds for the page to load.
Yeah, and with PDFs, you want it to be screen reader friendly too for your
Yeah.
blind players. So
Yep.
there's a lot that goes into making a PDF that does not go into making a physical book.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we are going to wrap up our conversation.
No.
And so I know. What I would like to do is to have everyone either go around and just share some advice specifically about pay, or even just in general for freelancing, and then or a takeaway or something that you feel is really, really important from this discussion that we had, because I know there's a lot here, and just something you want to highlight.
I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing that was said here for me is since this is obviously the freelancer pay and negotiations, if the publisher isn't upfront about how much the project pays, then that is a red flag. Definitely, I wouldn't say don't take the gig, but be wary, because if they're uncomfortable talking about money, that might mean that they don't have money to give you. Uh, so, because I'm very upfront. I'm like, as a freelancer, I'm like, hey, how much are you paying me? Oh, this is how much. Cool. And as a publisher, I say, would you like to write for this project? We pay this much. Done. Because if you're just upfront, it just alleviates everybody's stress about talking money anyway. So, just, money's part of the gig. Just be normal about it.
Oh my god, I had a thought and then it completely left. Wow, ADHD is fun.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
You know what? I'm going to say something that didn't come up. And that is, when you first start out in freelancing, a lot of times you say yes to literally everything. And that is a really, really fast way to burn out. So, while my first thing was going to say, know your worth and never do anything for free. Yes, always that. But also, know your time limitations. Because there's going to be more work. There's going to be more work.
Time also has value.
Yes.
And
taking every project is a fast way to burn out.
I have only recently learned that. So I am one of those people who I'm always working on a billion things at once, and I'm taking every job that somebody throws at me. I've learned to say no, and it is a gradual process.
I'm still working on that one. I have not learned from any of my lessons, and I continue to punish myself, and that's okay, because it's just me doing it to me.
Hey.
It's tough when so many people are making so many cool things, and you're like, I want to be
know.
involved in the cool thing. I don't need to sleep.
I could take vacation from work, right? That's fine. All right, and then James.
Never forget that exposure is something you either die of or get arrested for.
Yes!
I like it.
And I think my biggest thing would be to build up your safety net, build up your networking with other freelancers, to give yourself a safety net and people to lean on, because that's going to come up, and you're going to need people to help you get through hard times and get through slumps and stuff like that. So, connect with people. That's really important.
And up your cyber stalking game.
Yeah. Yeah. Make sure to check out people on social media. All right. So, speaking of social media, everyone, please share your social medias, and then we will have links to everybody in our show notes. So, who would like to go first?
I'll go first. I've been going first, so. And I have the loudest mouth, so it makes more sense for me to go first. Um, you can hit me up. I'm at Third Eye Games pretty much everywhere. At Third Eye Games on Facebook and Twitter and all of the things. But definitely what I would say is after you've gone to thirdeyegames.net and checked out all of the amazing games that we have there, definitely hit the link that's going to be below here for the Central Michigan University RPG design courses, the applied game design courses, because I'm doing a bunch of them. We also have Damon Stone, who's a brilliant board game designer who's going to come on and do a course, and also trying to remember Lamaro Smith, who's a great artist, and he's going to be talking about visual storytelling and how game art and branding and design and all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of really cool courses that you can take doing this, and this is kind of the first of its kind in the cooperation with Gen Con and CMU. So definitely come out and support us. We're trying to give back to the industry and really trying to bring up that next level of game designers who just need that a little extra push to put out their amazing games.
Awesome. All right, Jess?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at miss_Jess03. You can find the stuff that I've written or get in touch with me on my website, jessicamarcrumwrites.com. That's also linked on my Twitter. And you can come watch me stream every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern on my Twitch, which is twitch.tv/angrynerdgirl.
All right, and James?
Okay, well, like I was saying, I work at Noble Knight Games in Fitchburg, largest selection of games in the world. I challenge anyone to try and prove me wrong there. So it's nobleknight.com, and we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all those plots. And I just joined the Twitch Legion as well. I'm part of an every other Saturday game with the Madison area D&D players. So that's twitch.tv/Border Kingdoms Adventures. And I have no idea of any of the backstory of Tal'Dorei, but that's okay. The character I'm playing is equally clueless, so shenanigans happen lots of times.
Awesome. All right, and you can find my social media at thegeekypanda.com. You can also find me on all social media at bodyandsoul152 or at the Geeky Panda. And let's see here, for Darker Days Radio, I want to thank Darker Days Radio for hosting our podcast series. You can find us on, you can email us at darkerdaysradio@gmail.com. If you have any questions, please email there. You can also find us on Facebook at Darker Days Radio, on all other social medias at Darker Days Radio, or you can join our Discord. We do actually have a channel now for our writing, our RPG mentorship, where you can ask questions there. We've already had some really interesting conversations and have people asking questions, and I love answering and helping people figure out this industry. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. I want to thank all of my guests for coming on and being awesome. And yeah, I look forward to doing more episodes later on. Goodbye.